Today I wanted to talk about Saturn and the Saturn Return, my Saturn Return that is starting today. Welcome to the Diaries of a Witch podcast. My name is Angelica Creasy. I am filming this the day that I begin my Saturn return. I was born early Saturn in Aries, so Saturn is already in orb. Like, he's been in orb of my natal Saturn. He's just out of sign in Pisces. So I've been feeling him, I feel like, the whole spring. And the way that I've been describing it to people is like, I feel like Ellen in Nosferatu, when Nosferatu is like on the boat. It's very Saturn and Pisces. He's like on the boat in his casket coming over, and I'm waking up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat, and I'm just like, what is happening? That is what it has felt to have my Saturn return approach and it just be out of sign. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about, for my folks who are also going through their Saturn return, my Saturn and Aries people, we're going to chat a little bit about some of the dates that are important to understand for the Saturn return. But if you are not having your Saturn return right now, if this is just a normal Saturn transit for you or whatever, you don't have your Saturn natally in Aries, then this is still going to be a episode of note, something that you can use to understand this cycle. I'm going to kind of be like going back and forth of like my Saturn return suggestions and advice, as well as just like generally what it might feel, what this time period might be like. And I want to kind of like tie it all together just by talking about kind of like what my experiences have been so far, because yeah, I've already been feeling a lot. This technically, it hasn't happened yet, so I don't want to like tell you the tale of my Saturn return because it has not happened yet. Without further ado, let's just start chatting about some important dates and just the timing of Saturn and Aries. So Saturn enters the sign of Aries on Saturday, which is so funny. It's like Saturn's Day, right? Saturday, May 24th, 2025. So this episode has already come out. So Saturn is now in Aries. Woo, so exciting. He is going to retrograde at like 1 degree Aries. So he's stationing retrograde at 1 degree Aries on July 13th, 2025, and he is going to, slowly move backwards over that second degree and into the first degree of Aries, 1 and 0 degrees Aries. He's going to move backwards, and then he will move back into the sign of Pisces on September 1st, 2025. So this summer is going to be kind of interesting because we have him enter May 24th. He is hanging out in the first 2 degrees of Aries. He will be co-present with Neptune, who has already moved into Aries. They're not going to make an official conjunction until 2026, but they're going to be really close. Like, they're so close, and the jargon in the astrology world is a co-presence. When it comes to like the outer planets and the slower moving planets, typically the way that a conjunction would be discussed versus like a co-presence has a little bit more of a distinction. I think that when we're talking about the faster moving planets like Mercury and the Sun and Venus and all those, like, there's a little bit of a wider orb of like a conjunction, just because they move quicker, it happens quicker, it dissipates quicker. Whereas when it comes to Saturn and the outers, the orb tends to be smaller just because it takes so much longer for them to transit through that degree, right? Like, it could take Saturn and then the outer planets, it could take them even longer. Like, it could take them like weeks essentially, or months, to transit like 1 degree. So the orb, which is the amount of degrees that they are away from each other, needs to get reduced in terms of like talking about is this an actual conjunction where they're conjoining, where they're together in the same degree? Or is this just a co-presence? Like, are they just hanging out? Are they just chilling? Are they just like, they're about to kiss, but they don't? So Saturn and Neptune are about to kiss, but they don't. Saturn moves out of Aries in September, and then he's going to spend the fall and some of the winter back in the sign of Pisces. So if you are like a late Saturn and Pisces person, if you have your natal Saturn and like sort of like latter, like third decan of Pisces, like that last, like section of Pisces, you will have kind of like the final lessons of your Saturn return. I think generally speaking, if you had just gone through your Saturn return in Pisces, that this fall and winter will feel like a capping for you. It will feel like, okay, I'm like really putting the final lessons, I'm getting the trophy, hopefully. I am really putting a cap and closing this chapter of my life. But there might be things that come up that either show you how far that you've grown in this time, hopefully, or maybe you just feel like things are finally put to rest. Like you can finally kind of move on from that chapter, right? You might already have felt that way, especially if you were born with like an earlier Saturn in Pisces. You might already feel like you've really put the cap on the Saturn return, but just like see what happens this fall, because there might be like some interesting themes that reemerge or come up, or maybe like one final gift of Saturn, if you will. So this is kind of an interesting thing to talk about, because there's this idea that when a planet is in like the final degrees of a zodiac sign, or in the final moments of a transit, or something like that, the planet will leave you something. The planet will give you something. I even find this to be true when we're talking about the Time Lord technique. You may or may not be familiar with this technique, but it's a technique in astrology where basically every year of your life you get assigned a planet that rules over that year of your life. You can like go on AstroSeek and type in annual perfections, and you can find out your perfection year that you're having, which is a certain house that is being highlighted, and then the sign of that house is the sign of your perfection year, and then the planet that rules that sign is your Time Lord. So I even find this with Time Lord astrology, where like the last like week right before your birthday, right before your Time Lord switches over, you get like this burst of that planetary energy in your life, right? So even think about how things have shifted for you, like in the moments or weeks or days like leading up to your birthday every year. I feel like something major always comes through in my life, or happens, or I just feel different. I don't even know what it is, but my hypothesis is it's this kind of theory, this idea of the planet giving you one last big push of their energy before they move on. So this is true for the Saturn and Pisces people. This is also just true, generally speaking, with Saturn, right? Saturn has been at 29 degrees of Pisces. It's also often called the Anaretic degree, the first degree, and then the last degree of each zodiac sign. They're called the Anaretic degrees. In some types of astrology, the Anaretic degrees rule over things like fate or karmic experiences or a final lesson or a intro lesson, whether it be the first or the last degree. So essentially it can deposit, Saturn, can deposit a lot of wisdom when he's either in the beginning of a sign, which he will be this summer at 0 degrees Aries, or when he is at the last degree, right? Which he just left, but he'll also be activating that 29 degree mark later in the fall and in the winter of 2026. So when it comes to a big push of Saturn energy, the gift of Saturn, right? Saturn is the great malefic, he's not... he's not Venus, he's not Jupiter. Like an example of this is recently when Venus was in the final degrees of Pisces, which is her exaltation. It's like one of her favorite places to be. She loves Pisces. She's very Venusian in Pisces. She's very like, she can really just be not only herself, but she can be like a higher octave of herself in Pisces, which is Jupiter's sign. It's the sign of her exaltation. She just feels heightened in that sign. Anyway, the final hours of Venus in Pisces recently, I just happened to be thrifting. I like drove by a thrift store and I walked in and I just felt called to go thrifting, and I found the best items, like one of the best thrift hauls I've ever had. I found so much like dead stock vintage, a bunch of 90s dresses that fit me perfectly. I found this evening dress that you'll see. I'm wearing it to a wedding this summer, so you'll see it. It'll be on, I'll post it on Main soon. But this cocktail dress, literally got it for like $15 at the thrift store. Vintage, like late 90s Y2K cocktail dress. I have imagined this dress in my head. Like this, I literally think I might have created like this dress out of my mind, and then I found it at the thrift store. So like that is an example of the gift of Venus and her exaltation, the last couple seconds of Venus and her exaltation. I literally manifested this evening dress that I'd been dreaming about for a long time, right? Like, I don't know why, I just had the vision of this dress. And then I walked into the store, I saw it, I gasped audibly, I picked it up, and I went home, tried it on, it fit me perfectly, and I was like, holy shit, thank you, Venus. So that's an example of Venus in her kind of most benefic energy, giving you a gift, giving you one last push. So for Saturn, this might feel, or this might have felt, a little bit like he's giving you this parting gift of seriousness, of something that you now have to work harder on. He's giving you a responsibility of some kind. So as we are coming into the first couple of seconds of this Saturn and Aries transit, he's left the Anaretic degree of Pisces. He has entered the Anaretic degree of Aries. He's hovering at this really important threshold, right? And interestingly enough, I mean, the threshold of Pisces and Aries, it's literally like the end of the zodiac to the start of the zodiac. It represents in a lot of ways like total rebirth, new energy, the end and the beginning, like the World card, which is already Saturn's card anyway in the major arcana, so it's kind of interesting. But we're hovering around these important degrees. So expect, even if it's not your Saturn return, expect there to be these pushes of Saturnian energy, and think about it in terms of like, what responsibilities am I being given right now? Some of them might be really positive, like, wow, I just got offered this new job, or I just, I'm taking on this new responsibility over here. Some of the things might be things that are not as fun, responsibilities that you don't want to take on, things that you maybe have to learn how to say no to. That's another thing with Saturn, right? Is he wants to create some limitations so that we can experience like depth and experience like paring things back. I think at his most positive, he wants us to pare things back so that we can steadily work on things over time, steadily build to something over our lifespan. Saturn rules aging and getting older and the wisdom of aging, right? So he wants us to move slowly, steadily on things at his most positive. So think about some of these responsibilities that you're getting, either potentially as opportunities to build, or maybe you've been wanting to build for the last couple of weeks, months, years, and maybe Saturn, even if it's not your Saturn return starting or ending, maybe Saturn at these very important Anaretic degrees that represent the beginning of the zodiac and the end of the zodiac can really help to restructure the way that the building process has been going for you thus far, right? Think about it like that. How has my building process been going thus far? What have I currently built? Do these structures need to get rebuilt? What type of energy, how much energy do I need to put into the structure? The thing with Saturn and Aries is it definitely is Saturn when he is most susceptible to burnout. We didn't really even touch on this, but Saturn does not like to be in the sign of Aries. It's called his fall. This whole idea is from the scheme of zodiacal dignity, which I referenced earlier with Venus in Pisces. That's her exaltation. That's her, like, one of her favorite places to be. It's like her favorite vacation destination. Saturn in Aries is the opposite energy from exaltation. It's Saturn in his fall. It's his least favorite place to be in the entire zodiac. And the reason for this is because Aries is the exaltation of the sun. It represents, the equinox, the sun gaining light, this rebirth of spring energy in life. That's Aries energy, Aries is also really associated with Persephone. There's so many crossovers, but like rams are associated with Persephone, rams are Aries energy, the springtime connection, the connection of Persephone literally being called Kore or child or maiden, and then Aries being associated with youth and children and all of these things. There's so many connections. But that's why Saturn, who is this disgruntled, grumpy, old man who is often described or depicted as like adversarial in some way or on the outside of the general consensus. I mean, even I think this kind of tends to happen as you age in general, right? You start to become further and further away from the current zeitgeist of what's going on, the current culture, and you kind of have to either adapt or observe what is this new thing, this newfangled thing that all the kids are doing, and you kind of have to decide whether or not you will be on the outside or, what exactly you're going to do with it. But this is sort of what Saturn and Aries is about, right? This idea of like the old versus the new. How can we adapt or not? Should we even try to adapt? There's this tension between the newness of things, the newness of everything. Aries, the Anaretic degree of Aries literally being like the start of everything in a way, So this is what you're being asked to consider right now. What is the old news of my life? And what are these new areas, these new opportunities, these new responsibilities that are coming up? And how can I work through this threshold of time, this changing of time, this changing of the guards of time? I mean, that's literally what's happening with Saturn and Aries, because Saturn is Chronos, he rules over time and, chronology, Chronos, it's all connected. And so that's something that we have to consider too. Whenever Saturn enters a new sign, whenever there's a changeover, it's literally like time starts to move differently. The era that we were previously in starts to change. And this, can also be true for the outer planets. They really do mark these larger cycles and eras. And, I'm sure you've heard of like the Pluto eras being very much associated with the generations that we're familiar with, millennials, Gen Z, all that kind of stuff, right? Millennials are Pluto and Scorpio, Gen Z is Pluto and Sag for the most part. But Saturn moves signs every 2.5 years, 2.5, 3 years or so. So they're smaller eras. They're not these like huge like generational eras. They're smaller eras of time, but they still mark this shift in how we experience our lives, these almost like micro changes within the fabric of time. And this literally is because Chronos is the god of time, right? So when he changes sign, time is going to feel differently. So I also want to offer this as an opportunity for Saturn and Aries as you're experiencing a new time, like a new era, a new timeline, like whatever you want to think about it as. I don't know if you've felt this already. I've definitely been feeling this. And again, I also have my natal Saturn in early Aries. So it's like really intense for me because it's my Saturn return as well. But I have really been feeling this change of time, this shift of time, and, you know, this transit, right? From one anaretic degree to another that really marks this new cycle, this new era. And so consider what this can mean for you. I think that especially with Saturn and Aries, there's a lot of like, oh no, this transit is intense. It's going to be bad. It's going to be terrible, right? But one really positive thing of this transit is that you get to literally enter yourself into a little bit of a new time frame. And so you can do rituals around this. You can usher yourself into a ritual around this. I would probably just do a general like ritual. I don't even think you need to like really involve Saturn in this necessarily. I mean, you totally could, especially if you already have a practice with Saturn, or if you want to involve Saturn by like reciting like the Orphic hymn to Kronos or something like that. But just having a ritual where you're honoring the fact that one door is opening and another door is closing. You could work with the World card in tarot. You could, you know, put out a candle that represents the last couple of years of your life, and then light a new candle that represents the, you know, newness coming into your life. You can kind of structure this ritual however you want to, but that is totally something that I would do at this time frame, at this transition period. And you can even do this next year as well when Saturn enters Aries for the second time, because that might also be, you know, a time where you feel this changing in the way that time works, right? So again, we're getting this preview of it during the summer, and then the fall happens, and maybe again, it's a preview. You can kind of slip back into your old habits and old patterns and that sort of thing. And then in February, when Saturn re-enters the sign of Aries, this is happening on February 13th, 2026, then it is like the sort of more official start of this new era. I mean, it still starts now, right? But it's a preview period. And so that's another thing I would really recommend for you, regardless of whether or not this is your Saturn return or just this is a transit that you're having. Everybody's experiencing this right now. Really note and keep a journal if you can, or just note the things that happen during this time frame of this summer, especially before Saturn moves back into Pisces on September 1st. Note what's going on, what happens, what you're feeling, and especially write down things or be kind of thinking about this in terms of the things that Saturn rules over. Things like responsibilities, seriousness, limitations, paring things down, steady, stable, long-term growth, goals, legacy. Saturn also rules things like outsiders, adversarial energies. So there might even be, you know, some of that coming in your life. I don't know how much of that might be coming in, right? But there, you know, Saturn exalts in the 12th house in the zodiac, which is this house of isolation and imprisonment and enemies and, you know, hidden forces that are trying to come at you, right? Think about the next couple of months of your life through these lenses as it happens. And that could even be like a cool way to do a Saturn practice, this idea of timekeeping. This could be doing reflections on your day-to-day life as it happens, but just the idea of timekeeping in general could be a really helpful thing for you to do at this time that could also be considered like a Saturn practice or a dedication or offering to Saturn in some way. And this will also help you experience the passage of time so that when Saturn comes back around in February, you can go like, oh yeah, we already know what's happening, right? And for the folks who are currently entering their Saturn return, really pay attention to what happens this summer, because again, this is the preview period of the rest of your Saturn return, which is going to happen until 2028. Your Saturn return will make things serious for you. It's going to bring a level of seriousness and responsibility to your plate. A lot of people describe this as like the true entrance into adulthood, or this period where Saturn, the planet of aging and wisdom and all of these things, right? Time comes in and actually says, okay, it's your initiation now. It's your time to really leave your childhood in your earlier years, in your 20s in a lot of ways, right, behind, so that you can focus on what you're doing and what you're building and what your legacy is for the next, 27 to 29 years, because that's how often this transit happens. So basically you're creating the foundation that is going to last you for another 30 years. And that's what's happening this summer and in 2026 and 2027, 2028. So that's what's happening in the next couple of years. And so this is the preview of that. So you actually get this really fun, exciting time where, almost like from a divination perspective, you get to see what's gonna happen, not just in the next couple of years of the rest of your Saturn return, but also in the next 30 years of your life. You get a little bit of a preview. So notice what ends up coming up as themes, as things you're struggling with, as insecurities, as successes and opportunities. Notice all of these things, because these are the things that are going to continue to build or become very important parts of your next couple years and potentially the next 30 years of your life. I know a lot of people who experience their Saturn returns and they're like, wow, yeah, like everything that I went through, all the lessons that I learned, all the shifts that I made, all the positive opportunities that I got really helped me. And I don't even think I would have been able to usher into this next area or period of my life if I hadn't had worked on those specific things. So that's also what Saturn is giving to us and offering to us, this opportunity to work on and work through the things that we just cannot take into our next 30 years, into our adult life. So if you already know what these things are, if you already kind of can consider or conceptualize, what can I just not, or what do I not want to take with me? What do I have to leave behind? And you can start working on those things, whether it be with a therapist or magically or in a journaling practice or in a shadow work practice, however you want to approach these things, doing parts work with your inner child, whatever you want to do. These are things that are really helpful at this time. They're really helpful to start. They're really helpful to consider, because doing these things might just be part of your Saturn return, and maybe you get to take a little bit of an initiative, right? I mean, that's kind of what Saturn and Aries is anyway. It's like taking a little bit of an initiative for those things that you are ready to leave behind. Because, Saturn is the great malefic, but he also can be really refreshing as an energy when we know that we need to leave things behind, but we just don't feel like we can. And it might not happen in the way that you want to. It might not be pleasant. He might bring up a lot of fears and things that you're trying to avoid by holding on to those things. But if you're excited about the possibility to finally let some stuff go, this can be a really fantastic transit to just let that happen naturally and just get excited about that and maybe mentally prepare yourself for that happening, or maybe intentionally letting go of those things again through magic or therapy or however it is that you want to approach that. Even just paring down things in your wardrobe, cleaning your house, clearing things out. It's very Saturn, and these are positive ways to work with this transit, especially if you feel like it's kind of stressing you out, whether it's literally stressing you out because there's all sorts of things in your life changing, or you're almost worried about the transit. That's a really nice thing to do, is just okay, what can I pare back, right? Think of the scythe. What can I harvest? What can we work on right now? And how can we learn from what we've experienced? Whether that's in the last couple of years when Saturn was in Pisces, or whether that's in the last period of my life if you're currently entering your Saturn return. Another way to understand how this transit might feel in general, the transit of Saturn and Aries, we can work with this idea of rulership of the signs. So Aries is Mars's sign. It's his domicile. It's, Mars is associated with Aries. I think we can all agree with that, or all conceptualize that. It is also the sign of the sun's exaltation. The sun loves being in Aries for those reasons that I mentioned earlier. So Saturn transiting Aries means that he's not in his own domain. He's literally in a domain that he feels very uncomfortable in. He's in Mars's domicile. He's in Mars's house. So he has to work with what Mars gives him. So like think about like your grandpa, Saturn. He's in Mars's house, which is like a gym, you know, like a boxing gym or something. Your grandfather is here and he has to exist. He has to do his normal thing. He has to, you know, do his routine in this gym for, you know, until 2028 basically. So he's going to struggle here. He's going to not know what to do. He's going to not know how to use the equipment. He is not going to get along with the other people there. He's just going to be really uncomfortable. And so things that he's normally in charge of might fall to the wayside. But regardless of how he feels, he has to work with what Mars is giving him. So Mars, being the host of this transit, is giving Saturn things, giving Saturn objects, items, situations that he needs to now respond to. Mars is a boxer. Mars is a soldier. Think about like going into the ring for 2 minutes and you just fight your like head off basically. I used to do boxing. I know I don't seem like the type. I really do. I know it's shocking to all. I was like a karate kid. Like I did like American martial arts, like whatever karate is. I know that there's like actual lineages of like martial arts and whatnot. I was just in like general like American karate, right? But I started when I was like 4. I did it until I was like 16, 17. And then around that time, like, you know, as I was kind of going into college, like 18, 19, I started doing boxing and I got really into it. And I was like really, really into it when I was in college. And I would spar like every night and go to boxing, and I'd like run in the morning, like 2 miles, and go to the boxing gym at night. And it was like a whole thing. But this period of time taught me a lot about the nature of Mars. Mars is you go into the ring for 2 minutes and you come out and you're exhausted, and every movement, every second counts, or else you're going to get punched, right? That's not how Saturn works, right? Saturn is slow moving. He is thinking about time in these broader senses. He is not making the most out of every single moment. You know, he's looking back on the lifespan and reflecting on these like larger periods and these larger cycles and how they all intertwine. So that is like the discomfort of Saturn and Aries. It might even literally feel like time, and I know I kind of said this earlier, but like time isn't really working the way that it should, or just like difficult ways of conceptualizing time. So also make note of that in the next couple weeks. Like, does time feel like it's moving really fast? Does it feel like it's moving really slow? What is going on there? How can you use that to your advantage? How can that also be really frustrating to you, right? For the things that you're working on, the things that you're doing. Saturn is a strategist. He spends his entire life making progress. He's not focusing on the 2 minutes that he's in the ring. So this is where the difficulty comes in. You might have experiences during this transit where you have to make quick decisions. You are Saturn going into the ring for 2 minutes, and it's a real make or break thing, right? So also prepare yourself a little bit for this necessity even of having to make quick decisions, having to choose things, do things impulsively and go with them, right? And you might not actually end up continuing these things, especially after this transit is over. You might not have the same strategies or routines or impulses that you have given into during this transit, but they're kind of important for you to navigate your life right now. So some of you might have to be making these quick decisions, or what feel like quick decisions, for you to actually like get on the path of, you know, what this next couple of years is asking you to do. For those of you experiencing your Saturn return, you probably are kind of like this. In general, like you might just be a little bit impulsive, or you might be somebody who is like, you know what, I'm just gonna favors the bold, right? Like I'm just gonna go for it. I'm just gonna do it. I don't care what people think, right? So this actually might bring up some of these patterns that you've just been working through your entire life, right? And this period might actually ask you, oh, how have these things been working? Is it actually working for me to move so fast all the time, or do I need to slow down? My problem, one of my major problems as a Saturn and Aries natally person is I don't like screw the caps on things. So like the peanut butter, I will place the cap on the peanut butter, put it back into the the cabinet. I won't close the cabinet door. I'm running to the fridge. I'm getting the bread. I don't close the bread. I just throw it back in the fridge. What ends up happening is the kitchen's a mess. All the drawers are open. All the cabinets are open. My bread is stale. My peanut butter is, I don't know, all the oil or whatever has separated, and it's just gross, right? The whole thing is just a mess. The whole thing from start to finish is a mess. I'm scarfing down my sandwich. I don't enjoy anything, and then I move on with my day. This is what it's like having Saturn and Aries natally. So this transit might have you approach that tendency and go, okay, what are the problems? What has not been working? What is happening during this time period that's maybe making these things flare up more, or making me realize that these things are unsustainable? And you might have to change some of those impulses. And this might happen in a variety of areas of life. It could literally be like around productivity or around your day-to-day routine. It could be, more specifically in certain areas of your life. Look to also where the Saturn return is happening in your life, where you have Aries in your natal chart and whole signs astrology. As a Capricorn rising, this is happening in my 4th house, and every subsequent Saturn return that I have is happening in my 4th house. So this area is a really important theme for me, generally speaking, when it comes to learning Saturnian lessons. So it's family, it's property, it's the roots of my life. It's, things like my hometown and the, place of origin, family of origin, ancestors, all of these things. So for me, I might expect to learn some of these lessons or work on some of these things in regards to literally like family, ancestors, housing, etc., right? But I can also apply this idea of outlearning patterns and entering into new cycles. So I can expect to say, okay, these familial patterns, these things that I'm being roped in through due to generational things or ancestry or, where I live and that sort of thing, these things are unsustainable. These things are not working for me. These things I need to leave behind. And now I need to actually replace those things with new responsibilities, new patterns, new systems. Saturn is about the systems, new systems in things like family and housing and how I approach ancestors, right? So for me, I might decide to get more into my ancestor practice as a way to both heal from these things I need to leave behind and also create new systems, So that's something to look for with Saturn and Aries is for anybody, not just my Saturn return people, what new systems are being built in that area of your life that Aries rules. So when Saturn was in Pisces, it was my 3rd house. And so I was building networking systems within my local community because the 3rd house very much rules over like your local community where you're currently at, friends in that local community, siblings, extended family, that sort of thing. And literally like my sister moved back. She was living like in another part of the country for I think it was like 5 to 6 years previously, and then during Saturn and Pisces she moved back to our local community here in Massachusetts. So my relationship with her shifted and changed in a lot of ways and continued to shift and change, and new systems, new responsibilities even were built in that relationship. And then also a lot of things grew in terms of like my local connections, my local friend group, my local systems, my support systems, all those things, right? So think about maybe as a reflection, what was created and built in the Pisces area of your life or was broken down and dismantled. So think about those things. And again, it's the end and the beginning of the zodiac. So it's just like even more potent when it comes to endings and beginnings. That's why I say, like, no matter who you are right now, this is a major, massive time for endings and beginnings. If this is your Saturn return and you've been saying things like, future me is gonna do this, this is what this time period is about. It's about you becoming the future me, right? That's like literally what your Saturn return is about. And you know, take this with a grain of salt because I haven't actually experienced this yet, right? But from all of the astrologers that I've talked to, all of the books that I've read, everything that I've gathered about this transit through talking to people about it, and now I'm starting to experience it myself, that's what this is about. It's about becoming that future self that you've always kind of dreamed about. So I would even recommend doing some types of magic that help you get into the groove of what this future self is and looks like. This could be literally choosing to do those things that you feel like your future self does. This could be doing some glamour magic about stepping into that version of yourself. This could be getting really like serious and again, creating those systems around, okay, what would my future self be doing? How would they be carrying themselves? They would probably be screwing the jars on the peanut butter and sealing things properly so food doesn't go to waste. So I'm going to start doing those things. I've been feeling, it's happening in my 4th house, which is probably why I'm feeling this way, but I've been feeling like cleaning recently is my therapy. Like I will be going through my day-to-day life and be like, wow, I just really want to clean that thing right now, or I just really want to tidy up around here. My desk, which is like, this is my desk, I've always been the kind of person that literally has like the last 3 months of their life is on their desk. Like books, papers, random scraps of paper, cups. Like I was the kid with like the 47 cups in spoons in their bedroom growing up, where like your parents are like, where's all the silverware? Like it was in my room. So that's how I've always been. I'm kind of messy, and it's like that natal Saturn and Aries energy. Like I can't be bothered to think about cleaning. Like I'm just moving too fast, I'm doing too many things. We're not doing that. I've been really feeling like I want to clean. I want to keep things tidy. I feel like I see the value in that now, finally. And that's how things have been shifting for me. And it's like, I'm not even trying to like act like my future self. I just find myself doing those things because I'm being initiated into who my future self is right now. But that's what I'm saying. Like you can also work with this magically. I do so much work with my future self as like an internal intelligence. I work with my future self a lot in like the persona work that I do. I have a whole video on persona magic if you're interested in that topic. Whole podcast episode on that. I do a lot of glamour. I'm hugely into glamour. I'm a chaos witch. I'm doing a lot with like me on different timelines and whatnot. So this is the kind of work that I do anyway. And maybe it's because I am a Capricorn rising, I'm a Capricorn sun, I'm a Saturn girly, and I have natal Saturn in Aries. So I'm kind of just built with thinking about time in like a non-linear way in general, I think. So these are the types of magics that I would recommend to do at this time. You might, and this is something that I will really like give you the opportunity to decide whether or not it's right for you, right? You may want to work with Saturn devotionally at this time during your return, or you may not want to. You may feel like there's so much Saturnian energy going on in your life that the last thing you need is to go to the altar and see his face staring back at you. So this is totally up to you. And, you know, if you've like never worked with planetary energies before, I don't know if I would recommend diving in the deep end with Saturn. You know what I mean? I don't know. I don't think I would recommend it. But if you already have a practice with Saturnian deities, Saturnian energies, if you've been working with kind of planetary magic or planetary devotion for a couple of years and you feel like comfortable or confident in bringing Saturn in through your Saturn return, through this transit, then I think it's a great opportunity for that as well. But working with time and your future self and that type of magic is a type of Saturnian magic in a way. It is Saturnian, but it's not like explicitly Saturnian planetary magic. It's like kind of another way to conceptualize magic for this time period. And I think it would be really helpful, and it would be great for anybody, even for folks that don't really work Saturn planetary magic, because that's not really what it is, if that makes sense. If you do want to work some Saturnian magic during this time, I would really recommend checking out this book, which is called The Cult of the Black Cube by Arthur Morose. And this is a really interesting book. So this is a Saturnian grimoire. There was a new edition. The third edition was just published a couple of years ago by Theon Publishing, which is one of my favorite like occult publishing houses. I love all the books that come out of there. This book has like kind of mixed reviews. I've seen a lot of people say that they don't like this book. I've seen a lot of people say that they loved this book. Personally, I like this book. It is like half kind of a treatise on Saturn and who Saturn is, and Saturn kind of in his archetype broadly. And then the other half is a Saturn grimoire. So it's like rituals, how to build an altar, rites that the author recommends that he's either written or, you know, worked with in the past. And I just found it to be really fascinating. Some people feel like this book's kind of dry. It's a Saturn book written by a Saturn devotee. Like, do we expect this to be riveting literature? I find it really useful. I really like this book. So I would definitely recommend this if you are interested in going deeper in Saturnian magic, ritual, or potentially even devotion with Saturn, either as a deity energy or as like a planetary energy. This book is awesome. And then another book that I would also recommend is much more astrological, and it is Saturn by Liz Green. Liz Green is a great like Hellenistic mythic astrologer. I really like her work, and she wrote a great book on Saturn. And this is, you know, about like Saturn in the birth chart, Saturn in your personal astrology. So it's kind of like part reference book, part information on Saturn and how he functions in birth charts and in natal astrology. So I would also recommend checking this one out. And these just could be good books to read or to bring into your life during your Saturn return or during Saturn in Aries. Because again, Saturn feels really not stable in the sign of Aries. So by working with Saturn in these smaller ways, by like learning more about him and that sort of thing, it could actually be really positive in how you see his influence in your life. And something I would really recommend, this is gonna be my last tip, is just asking your spirit team, asking your gods, your guides, what you need to learn from this time period or how you can use this time period, regardless of whether it's your Saturn return or not. I think that that's a great way to approach this. And again, you could approach Saturn himself about this if you wanted to. Again, I would recommend that if you already work with a Saturnian deity or you're interested in this type of planetary magic, you are feeling excited about that, you know, you can totally ask him. Again, he is not feeling super great in Aries right now, so he might not actually be able to give you incredible advice, but he's still the leader of this transit. He still knows ultimately what this transit has in store for you. So he might not be forthcoming of that information. I don't know. It really might depend person to person. But definitely you could ask Saturn as well, or like offer something to him. Like, this is what I'm going to be doing during this time period is I'm just going to be offering him like a project. Like, I'm going to be basically saying to Saturn, okay, I'm going to work on this Saturnian thing, the Saturnian project during my Saturn return. And, you know, this is my offering to placate you, basically. So, yeah, I'm going to be kind of doing a couple things. I'm going to be working on putting together like a Saturn class where we're going to be talking about Saturn and like his archetypes and mythology and just so much juicy Saturn information. So I'm going to be putting that together during my Saturn return and teaching that and doing that during the Saturn return. I don't know when that's coming out yet, but that is something that I'm working on. And I'm kind of working on another project too that is Saturnian ish. It's Saturn's involved in it so in some way. So those are going to be like my offerings to Saturn. But this might be something in regards to discipline. This might be a new responsibility you want to take on. Like, I will clean my house. I will take on X responsibility that is good for me, that is like I'm strategically taking on because it's something that I know is going to help me in my life and get me on the path that I want to be on. So those types of things are things that I would recommend potentially offering up to Saturn, almost like to placate him, like, hey, don't ruin my life. And my advice in general is just to ride the wave of this energy, especially if it's your Saturn return. Have a great Saturn and Aries summer and winter next year, and just the next couple of years in general. I'm holding a magical writing class called Ace of Swords. It's happening on May 29th, which is the Mercury Cazimi, so it's when Mercury and the Sun are conjunct, and it's a great day for writing and communication in general, so I thought it would be perfect. It's also in the sign of Gemini, which is like Mercury's like one of his best signs to be in, especially for writing. So I decided, I was like looking at this date and this Cazimi, and I was like, this would be the perfect time to do a magical writing class. So we're going to be talking about all the different types of magical writing, like hypersigils and automatic writing and petitions. We're going to be going through all of those different types of magical writing, as well as how to actually like strengthen your spells by bringing in like some writing techniques. And we're going to be talking about different writing techniques and like persuasive techniques to actually get the most out of your petitions and spell work and invocations and all of these things, right? So we're going to be talking about magical writing and also how to like improve your writing in magical contexts to get more out of it. This is going to be a really in-depth class, and it's happening in the Coven tier of my Patreon. You can also buy a drop-in ticket on Patreon shop if you just want to buy like the post, and it will unlock both the replay and the live event. So join us live on May 29th. And speaking of my patrons, I wanted to give a shout out to my Diary and Coven tier members. So thank you so much, Jamie, Cheryl, Emma, Alexis, Alessandra, Ashley, Luna, Taylor, Jordan, Chelsea, Megan A, Megan M, Natalie, Jen, Lauren, Kayla, Lindsay, Sarah, Quinn, Peony, Joanna, Megan S, Megan R, Callie, Nina, Irene, Chelb, Haley, Desiree, Emmy, Hannah, Georgia, Adri, Liz, Kay, Esty, Kristen, Shell, Veronica, Isabella, Junie, Elena, Teddy, Paige, Shania, Mina, Kimberly, Finian, Barbie, Lucy, Amber, Madeline, Katie, Orja, Laura, Brittany, Desiree, Dahlia, Molly, Violet, Jess, Ashley, Jessica, Candace, Belladonna, Kia, Laura, Kalila, and my newest member, Eddie. Thank you so much for being patrons. I really appreciate your support. Your support helps this podcast. It helps all of my work, all of my content, and you get a ton of exclusive events and so many things as well as being a member. So thank you for being patrons, and thank you to all my listeners. Thank you for being here, and we will talk very soon. Bye.